Welcome to the Champion Circle. We are super excited and happy to be here today, as we always are, because we have such amazing individuals to highlight and to showcase. And of course, the first thing I always like to do is give thanks. Gratitude is my attitude, and it's something that we need to focus on and give thanks to people who help you and do the things that you want to do to make a difference. We are here because of Liga de Justicia Abogados, their support, as well as Liga de Justicia Foundation. And we are here to serve our community, showcase and highlight amazing individuals. And today, the situation is no different than it has been in the previous 11 or 12 episodes. Today, we are privileged. I'm humbled and honored to be here with my brother, who actually I met maybe a couple of years ago. And I got to know when I was blessed with the opportunity to be on a radio show with him, and we really bonded and connected. So we want to welcome none other than Mr. Charles Fox. Welcome to the show.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. I'm just thrilled to be here today. When I was driving into the studio just now, I'm like, I can't believe that he wants to talk to me and interview me. It's very difficult. You know how it is when you do this work. You don't really do it for the kudos or the glorification of it. You do it because you really believe in something. So an opportunity to have someone talk about me and my life and my story, it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that. But I respect you, and I just have such a deep appreciation for all the work that you've done. And even before I've actually known you, I've heard your name in so many circles, and it's always been positive, it's always been good. So to finally connect with you and really get a sense of where you're at and what you're doing, it's just great to kind of share those good vibes with each other. So thank you so much.
You're too kind, Charles. So I think it's important that our audience understands that it takes such a large village to do just a small part to make life successful for so many. And you and your role at the Legal Aid Society of Suffolk County is something that perhaps is overlooked, and with the current administration is not something that's applauded maybe to the level that it should be. But you as the Director of Diversity and Development is a critical component of the success of our society, right? So, you're too humble and oftentimes it's the choir that is really doing most of the work, right, at church or what have you. It's the same individuals, but nonetheless, we're going to talk about and focus on you. This organization and this podcast is all about highlighting the individuals so that your story can inspire so many,
right.
Whether it's young men of color, whether it's just young Long Islanders or older people like myself. You inspire me every day. So let's talk about, Charles, let's talk about your story. This is your life, right? So, and for those of you that are young, you don't understand that reference at all.
You dated yourself for that one.
But I can tell you that there was a show many, many moons ago when I was a child called This Was Your Life. And, it talked about people telling their story. And that's what we're doing here today. So, Charles, tell me a little bit about your background, about your youth, about your just the beginnings of, you and your family.
Wow, that's such an existential question that I don't think too much about that on a regular basis, because you're kind of always in the mood of kind of going, and you don't really get the chance to really reflect on where you've been and what you've come from. So I appreciate you asking me that. So I was born here in Long Island in Suffolk County. I was born in Stony Brook Hospital 42 years ago, almost 43 years ago. It seems crazy to even say that because. Just on a side note, you know how it is when you're kind of a young professional and you're starting out in your career and everybody's like, oh, this guy's, you blink an eye and the next thing you know, you are, 30.
Right.
And then you're 40.
Right.
And then you're like, whoa, I'm a mid-career professional now, whereas I used to be, the young kid on the block. But yeah, so I was born at Stony Brook University Hospital to Myrtle and Charles Fox, my mother and father, who I love dearly. They instilled in me from a young age to have pride in myself and to be deliberate in all the things that I was trying to do. I have two older sisters, Sharmika Fox and Charlana Fox. All of our names start with CHAR. That was very deliberate by my father and mother.
And what's the significance of that? So let's give a little.
The significance really is just wanting to have a name that sounded like Charles.
Okay.
So they all start with those letters. My name was supposed to be Lamont, actually.
Okay.
I might be dating myself a little bit too, but if you're familiar with Sanford and
You're
Son,
not going to Sanford and Son. I knew you were going there.
if you're familiar with Sanford and Son, my name should have been or would have been Lamont Fox.
Okay.
My mother wanted that name for me, and the story as I've heard it was my father was looking kind of pitiful in the hospital, like, I want him to be named Charles Jr. And she said, okay, fine. He can be Charles Jr., so that's how I got the name.
Well, you know, Lamont had the nickname Dummy. So we wouldn't want that for you.
That is exactly why I don't think Lamont was the best choice for me. I think Charles fits me better.
Yes, sir.
And since my father has passed about 6 years ago, carrying on his legacy is something that's very important to me. So whenever I write my name, I love to put Junior because I want the world and everybody I interact with to know that this is where I come from. This is who I'm trying to honor and uplift.
God bless, and he's here. He is here with you and supporting you every day.
Thank you for that. I do believe that. So childhood for me was a lot of playing, a lot of sports, a lot of bickering, arguing with my sisters, in love, of course, never anything serious. But I just grew up a kid that really was, I don't want to say unsure of himself, but I was definitely reserved. I was definitely a kid that if you had told me 30 years ago I'd be doing this, I would have said no way. There's no way that I'm going to be sitting in front of a camera talking about myself or going in front of audiences and talking about different topics. That's not something I would have thought that I would have done when I was a child. Very shy, extremely shy kid, to the point where I have a son who's 6 years old now. I see so much of myself in him that I'm always actively sort of trying to encourage him to step out of his comfort zone because I don't want him to miss opportunities the way I did. So, you want to try this, you want to try Little League, go try it because you don't want to be that kid that misses out on so many things because you're just not comfortable, talking to people or being amongst people that you don't know. You and I know that this work, that's all it is networking and relationships. So back to childhood. This is really tough for me because it's been a long time since childhood is a long time ago for me. So growing up, we had a household full of love. I know it sounds cliche, but think of the sitcoms, Family Matters, Cosby Show. And I probably shouldn't say Cosby Show now. That's probably not the best reference to use now. But the show is the reference. So just a family that was built on love and togetherness and spending time and making sure that when you came into those four walls that you were protected and you knew you were loved and you knew that, everything was going to be okay. I do not come from a privileged or wealthy background by any means, but my parents worked exceedingly hard to be able to provide for us and give us the things that we needed. And that's what all I'm trying to do in my own sort of being a parent.
What town?
I grew up in East Patchogue, actually.
Okay.
And I went to Bellport High School, which could be a whole nother podcast about the dichotomy of the Bellport community. Because if you're familiar, you cross the train tracks and it's two different worlds. And everybody coalesces in the same school, which causes a lot of, let's say, interpersonal challenges.
So do you think that could have been a small kind of causal effect on your being reserved and your shyness, the fact that you were in that kind of cultural, conflict type of issue?
Definitely. Now that you say it, I definitely think that probably played a role in it. I also think being insulated from certain things. So my parents tried to protect us from certain things that were going on that they wanted us to enjoy being a kid, enjoy your childhood and don't worry so much about the problems of the world because all that stuff is going to be waiting for you when you get older. So they did try to shield us from a lot of things. I wouldn't say that I was a sheltered kid by any means, but they definitely tried to make sure that, again, when you came into those walls, don't worry about what happened here. Don't worry about what happened at school. Don't worry about how we're going to keep the lights on and keep the heat on. Just worry about the time you had with your family. Right. And now in retrospect, I realize that time is so fleeting. You don't get that back.
Indeed.
People move on, you lose parents, people pass on, people move away. It's not always the situation where it's as easy to get together as it used to be. So,
how would you summarize your school experience up until, let's say, 9th grade? Was it, because I was just talking to a friend of mine just today, and I happened to mention that my daughter has never been taught by a teacher of color. She's in ninth grade.
Wow.
That's deep, right? That is profound.
Right.
That I come from an environment, I grew up in the Bronx, right? Very diverse. The students were more diverse than the teachers, but at least we had several teachers of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian, et cetera, et cetera. In a school district that's very affluent, in a school district that has a very competitive salary, that obviously has the capacity to recruit the most talented, most qualified individuals. How is it that, there is no diversity in that, right?
Right.
So for your school experience now, obviously we're talking about, years ago, how was it with the student body? How was it? How supportive were the teachers, the administration, et cetera?
Mark, it's really interesting that you said that, because as you were talking, I'm sitting there thinking, did I have an African American or Latino teacher in my grade school years? And it really, if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be wrong because I have to really go back, I don't think I had an African American male teacher until 12th grade.
Right.
12th grade.
Right.
In terms of Latino, Latina, African American female, really just will say person of color, probably not until late middle school, if I'm remembering correctly. And again, it's a school district that had diversity, but it was very segregated.
Right.
So the proverbial sort of the Black kids sit over here, the white kids sit over here, the Latino kids sit over there. It was very sort of isolated like that. So looking back on that experience, that probably, you probably hit the nail on the head. I think that probably did play a factor into my chosen career path, and how big I am on inclusion is because I want people to understand that these words that we keep hearing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, these are not bad things. These are core American principles and values that we have to uplift and uphold. So I don't want to, throw shade at any school district or anything like that, but I definitely think that there was a need for diversity in the instructional, in the faculty, in the school district that wasn't necessarily there. Do
you remember it being? Do you have good memories of up until through middle school? Do you have good memories? Did you have any traumatic experiences? Hopefully not, right? Talk to us about it.
It's interesting. I don't think there was many traumatic experiences, which is a blessing and a fantastic thing. And again, I was shielded from a lot of stuff because my family was not really big on sort of, hey, you can go have a sleepover with this person because they need to know people's parents. They're not letting me go to anybody's house.
Yeah, my daughter complains all the time. No sleepovers for you. They can come here if they want.
Right. And it was kind of like, let's try to vet people's parents. But I wouldn't say anything traumatic happened in my youth in that sense. I do think that going to that school district, or really going to just being in that situation, I think it most certainly taught me a lot about myself. It taught me how people sort of self-segregate and how people sort of lean towards people that look like them, and they're kind of, in some ways, unwilling to step outside their box and step outside of what's comfortable for them.
Right.
And we have to really actively do the work of challenging ourselves to step out and say hello to the kid that doesn't look like you.
Correct.
The kid who doesn't necessarily think like you, the kid who doesn't worship like you, the kid who doesn't love like you. That's the beauty of diversity that we kind of lose in a lot of these conversations, is that that's a good thing. We want kids to be able to interact with each other and feel some sort of commonality with one another. That I think it really bridges gaps is what I'm really trying to say. It really helps people to think about, we're all on this planet together. Culturally, we may be different. We may come from different places. We may worship or think different things, but we all have to experience life in similar ways. And there should be no real barriers to that. Cultural diversity is a strength.
Right. Well, and we have more in common than we have differences,
Without
right?
a doubt.
So at the end of the day, that's one of the most eloquent ways that, you could state what you were talking about when it comes to DE&I. So the formative years of 14 to 18 high school years, tell me a little bit about what do you remember from that created a foundation for who you are today?
Right. So I have to take a step back because I was just thinking about something. So my middle school years were not traumatic. I would not say that. But, and this is going to come as a shock to certain people that know me now, I didn't always behave in middle school.
Okay.
So I had some, I know, right? And I'm not saying that I was like this terrible kid that was doing heinous, horrible things, But I went through phases where, okay, let me try to be the class clown now. Let me try to be that kid. Let me try to be the bully kid. And I apologize to anybody who might have gotten caught up in that with me. But there were definitely periods of time where I tried to be something that I wasn't. And I think what I really learned throughout that process of being age 12, 13, 14, and then getting into high school is that you got to be yourself.
Right.
You cannot try to be something that you're not. I was never comfortable being sort of the life of the party. That's just not me. That's not my style. I certainly wasn't comfortable being somebody who sort of picked on other kids or bullied kids. I wanted to be the kid that stood up to that stuff. So that was sort of the end of my middle school years. I remember when I was 14 years old in 8th grade, my guidance counselor, who I'm still in touch with now, who's been a mentor for 30 years to me, he put me in a program that was designed to get kids who were sort of at the crossroads where you can go this way or you can go that way. Let's try to save these kids and help them go down the right path. He put me in a program where I got to work with younger kids, and I got to work with high school kids at the time. And we just sort of had conversations about, what we think about certain issues, and we try to mentor one another. And that sort of, what I would say is the genesis of me wanting to be sort of in community work.
Love it.
Right. So then moving on, sort of getting into high school, I'm more focused. I'm like, I'm not going to try to be something I'm not. If I'm the shy kid, I'll be the shy kid to the best of my ability. That's just what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to appease anybody or please anybody or fit in with this group or that group. That's not something that works for me. It's not something that really works for anybody, but people will try to do it. So you get into high school, and I started taking more of an interest in sports, and I want to play basketball. So I tried out for basketball team and was lucky enough to make the team. And you get that camaraderie with your teammates, and you learn a lot from team sports, I have to say.
Indeed.
That's one of the things that really kept me on the right path, was that I know if my grades are not, especially because my coach was that same mentor or guidance counselor that I told you about in middle school, you're not going to play if you don't have the grades together. You're not going to play if I hear that you're getting in trouble in school. If you're on suspension, you're not going to show up at practice and still play in the games. These are things that you instill in people to say, hey, there's got to be accountability for your actions. So that taught me a lot. So that was, high school was an interesting experience. Looking back on it, it's like the blink of an eye, it was over. But when when you're in it,
right,
high school is forever. 4 years is a long time when you're only 16 years old.
What were your strengths academically? What kind of organizations did you get involved in back then?
I wish I had been involved in more organizations. I think I focused a little bit too much only on sports.
Okay, that's fine.
And but my talent level wasn't quite there.
Right. I feel you.
If I was sitting here doing this interview with an MBA pedigree, it would be different. I would be funding organizations and doing all types of different things. But my talent level, and I will credit my father with saying, Charles, make sure, or Chucky as he called me, make sure you have, eggs in different baskets. I'm not trying to, he never tried to dissuade me or discourage me, but he did not want me leaning into sort of, I'm going to be a basketball player, because the statistical odds of that happening are not very high. Let's just be real about that. So, he would always tell me, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you sort of are interested in? What are the things that you want to, pursue? At that age, you don't know. You really don't know. So you sort of find your calling and find the things that interest you, and you try to, and I can't say that by 12th grade I knew what I wanted to do.
Right. Most people don't.
No, absolutely not.
That's a blessing. That's something that, I call it coming from God, when you can identify your purpose as young as, your teenage years or something. That's very uncommon.
Yeah.
So you graduate. Did you graduate at a high level academically?
So academically, I was always a good student. And it's funny because going back to sort of being a knucklehead and kind of cutting up and trying to be something that I wasn't, I'll never forget. I was in 9th grade, and I had sort of it was probably one of the best report cards I ever had. It was like straight A's. It was amazing. And I was going around the cafeteria showing people. And I'm like, hey, probably not the best thing to do if kids are, but, you're a teenager. But remember, I'll never forget, one kid was like, what do you think, you're white or something?
Oh, no, he didn't.
African-American colleague or a colleague, peer of mine said, this guy, Charles, thinks he's white. And I remember thinking, well, what are you talking about?
Right. That makes no sense.
Do white people have a monopoly on academic achievement or something? Did I miss something? And I never got an explanation for that from him. But that taught me that there were certain people that they have a certain mindset, and it's hard to break that mindset.
Right.
And we still struggle with that even today, with sort of thinking that Latinos or African Americans or Asians or whoever it is,
Right.
you cannot be limited to by whatever the world projects onto you. You can't. You'll fail that way. But I remember internalizing that and thinking, should I sort of dial it back a little bit and sort of maybe not focus too much on school?
Imagine that.
Imagine a young man thinking he should dumb himself
Right.
down for the benefit of others. And we've since learned that, I've since learned that your light's not going to shine if you're always trying to dim your light for other people.
Correct.
That's just not the way it works. And that wasn't going to work for me. But I remember feeling just these weird feelings in the moment. Like, he just said I was acting like something I'm not because I'm doing well in school.
Right. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. But
And more unfortunate for him than
Yes.
for anything, right?
Absolutely.
Because then, to me, what that tells me is that he has low self-esteem, low self-worth. He obviously doesn't associate himself with academic excellence and all of those things, right? So because of that, now I have to throw shade your way and put you down for something that I can't do or I don't believe I can do.
And that's exactly what you just said is exactly what has continued to happen. People will always throw shade at you and denigrate you for things that they themselves can't do.
Right.
Or they don't feel comfortable trying. Because I always tell, like, when I walk into a middle school or a high school to do a presentation with kids, I tell them off the bat, there's nothing about me that's special in a sense. Don't think that because I come in here with a suit on and I got a few good words I can say to you guys that I'm somehow superior to you or that I was a better kid than you. It's always there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Any kid that's had an issue in their lives or is going through something, that could have easily been me.
Right.
Maybe a mentor that wasn't around. If they weren't around, maybe I go a different way. Maybe if my parents weren't sort of stern with me on certain things, maybe I go a different way. That's just life. So I never like to kind of approach any situation with this air of superiority over people and thinking that I've somehow achieved mastery in anything.
Right.
I'm just a guy out here that's trying to learn and do good and do better.
Your humility is truly inspirational. So post high school, did you know what you wanted to do or where you wanted to go your junior or your senior year? What was your strategy once you graduated?
Mark, I wish I could say I had a strategy, but but I'm being completely frank and candid with you. There was no real strategy there, and I kind of dropped the ball. But, and again, this is not to scapegoat anybody else for my own life choices and life situations and circumstances. But I always tell this story. There was a guidance counselor who I think I went into her office in 10th grade or 11th grade. And we're having a conversation. My grades are pretty good. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should start thinking about SATs, college, this, that, and the third. And she says, Charles, I'm looking at your transcript. I just don't know. I just don't know that you are college material. And I said to myself, and I've told this story many times, and Deborah Sterling has heard this story before, that was like a gut punch to me. Because up until that point, I had always been encouraged by people in higher positions in education, whether it's my guidance counselors, teachers. Charles, keep going. Do this. You're a great writer. You're great at math. You're great at this. Once you have one person who you kind of have put your trust into to encourage you and facilitate your growth, and they kind of uppercut you like that, it's devastating. And I always wonder, had I not had the guidance and the structure and sort of just people in my life that would not allow me to kind of internalize that and let that deter me, what happens to me?
Right.
It's like the Langston Hughes poem, what happens to a dream deferred?
Indeed.
What happens? What happens when you tell a kid who doesn't have good parenting, doesn't have good mentorship, doesn't have all these different things in their lives? What happens when you tell them they can't be anything? Right. Or they can't go to college. They can't go to the military. They can't become a police officer or a teacher or an attorney or an engineer or whatever it is. What happens when you tell that kid that?
Right.
I was fortunate.
Yes.
In many ways, I was very privileged. I know that there's different ways we talk about privilege, but having two-parent household, having a middle-class upbringing, that's a measure of privilege.
Indeed.
That a lot of kids that we've worked with don't have.
Correct. What they call adverse child experiences.
Absolutely.
Right? The ACEs, right?
Right, and I'm lucky to have never had many of those.
Right. And so that self-doubt, I deal with self-doubt, right? And that monster feeds so easily. So all it takes is the most inconsequential, insignificant, unsupportive person to say the slightest thing, and oh, wait a minute, maybe I can't do it. And all of the self-doubt that I have within me winds up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy and becomes something that deters me and dims my light, like you say, in your light, right? So the fear that we all have, the self-doubt that we all have to some degree at different times in our life, when it's done to a child, it's almost criminal, right? Because when it's done to an adult, we can't deal with it. So imagine a young person like you in that scenario. So, I mean, God bless you for being able to persevere and do the things necessary to continue your path.
Right. And I cannot take sole credit for that. I can't say that I had this fortitude to kind of push forward and say, no, I don't care what that person thinks. Because there was definitely times when I was like, wait a minute, maybe she's right. Maybe this is not for me. Maybe I need to do something else. But and you've got people in your lives that won't let you falter. And I was obviously privileged to have two older sisters that had already been successful. So that was always a lot of pressure coming up in grade school because, oh, your last name is Fox. You're Sharmika's little brother. There's an assumption that you're going to be really, really good academically because she was phenomenal and continues to be. Charlana Fox, my older sister. That's your sister? Okay. I'm not going to have no problems with you. I know your family pedigree. I know your family history. So there's a lot of pressure there. So I think in some ways I might have kind of rebelled against that at times. But think about sort of the amount of educators out there that behave that way. Think about that soft bigotry, we call it that soft bigotry of low expectations, where you're sort of, you're projecting your own flaws and sort of uncertainty onto a young person. And like you said, how that young person is going to internalize that and how that can make the difference between somebody going one way and somebody going another way.
Right. And the destruction becomes a societal destruction. And that's where I just don't get these folks that want to essentially correlate diversity, equity, inclusion, and other things with less qualified. Right. And the fact that we celebrate diversity and we bring a diverse group of people to a table to make better products and services winds up becoming something that is threatening or perhaps is something that we should not celebrate. But when we don't do those things, we actually hurt the entire society, and the very people that are fighting against it are hurt as well. Right?
You have to absolutely agree. You have to think seriously about the mindset of a person who can hear the words diversity, equity, inclusion. You can include belonging in there too, or accessibility can be included in that. Think about the mindset of a person who hears those words and immediately, like a knee-jerk reaction, thinks less than. I don't get it. I don't understand how the conversation is sort of pivoted to that. I'm trying my best to sort of refocus the conversation on what those words and what that title, that acronym actually means. But it's going to take amazing people such as yourself and other folks to sort of say, no, this is what this means. Let's have a conversation about it. If you are confused or you're not 100% sure what this actually entails or what it means, let's have a conversation about it. And that's what's missing, I think, in our dialogue right now is that we don't have dialogue. We just have monologue. We have people screaming at each other, and then they retreat to their echo chambers, and then there's no real progress that happens.
I heard once or many times, too many people listen to respond.
Oh, my God, yes.
Right? Instead of listening to understand and now communicate, right? And I do it myself, right? When you go to law school, you're taught to listen to respond. I have to give a counter argument. I can't listen to really understand and empathize and sympathize because it's an adversarial relationship by nature. But the best attorneys will listen to understand and then create that chess move and that counter strategy that's necessary to really connect with a jury or to connect with a judge and all of those things. So, you know, you touch on so many amazing things. And so what I wanted to have the audience understand is your mindset in your senior year in high school and your decision to pursue what?
So my decision to ultimately go to college and try to pursue an associate's degree and then a bachelor's degree. It's sort of, I kind of came to it in a roundabout way because, again, I dropped the ball. And I'm going to say that, I'm going to preface it by saying this is in no way is this an affront to community college. I think community college is phenomenal. It's fantastic. I had an amazing experience at Suffolk Community College. I will always represent them to the fullest, but I didn't give myself many options. And I'm thankful that Suffolk Community College exists because I didn't even really make any applications to any schools. I didn't apply to schools, and this is going to sound crazy, but I didn't apply to any four-year schools my senior year of high school until April, May, when I'm about to graduate. It's too late.
Right.
My SAT score was fine. It would have gotten me into some of those schools, but you just waited. And it's like my parents in that moment, I think they were trying to sort of not teach me a lesson, but they assumed that I could handle all that.
Right.
Like they would take care of the financial aid aspect of things, but college applications, figuring out where you want to apply, that's on you.
Yeah.
That's your thing. But I dropped the ball, and there's no one to blame for that but myself. Although I could definitely point the blame at other people within the school system, because I do think that guidance counselors have a responsibility to sort of rein kids in and say, hey, it's your junior year. What are you doing? It's your senior year. We're in January. What's going on? You applying? Do you want to go here? You want to go to trade school? Checking in and having those conversations would have been helpful. But again, that's on me.
Right. Ultimately, you had to be responsible.
I have to be accountable for that, because I have to be able to say, it's getting late in the game. I got to go talk to somebody about what I want to do after I leave here.
But as you know, as I know, the brain continues to develop until the age of 25.
Sure
right?
does.
And so at the age of 18, it would be, I think, disingenuous to put that burden on the student alone.
Right.
Right. And so I had a similar experience where my mother kind of didn't deal with the whole application process and all of those things. But she was sure to ask me every once in a while, did you apply? And if you don't get in, you better get a job.
That's it.
And you better pay me some rent and all of those things, right? So there was accountability, but there wasn't a knowledgeable support or mentoring of the process that your counselors were responsible for.
Right.
And should have been proactive, because the best people at their job are doing things that uplift people, not that just check in with students, or not that don't even check in with students, right? So, I'll allow you to, not point, any, not throw any shade on those individuals, but quite frankly, the best counselors, guidance counselors, et cetera, are those who really take an interest and help uplift, right? So you went into Suffolk Community College, and you mentioned how you're appreciative and that you celebrate the great education that you got there. But when you applied and you got in, as you were entering your first semester, did you feel like it was kind of like a back burner type of option?
Probably only for a few weeks, because I went to Suffolk. I started at Suffolk Community in August of 2001, right after high school. So I go there and I see a bunch of other kids that I know, and I'm like, well, what's going on? They're like, this is a bunch of kids I went to high school with. Like, what is this? A lot of kids made those same mistakes I made and didn't apply, or they didn't have the grades, or they just weren't really sure what they wanted to do, so they figured they would go to a school that costs less so they can sort of make a mistake and have to be on the hook financially for a lot of money. But within a few weeks, I would say, probably within that first month, so from like August to September, all those kids were gone. Okay. Because they couldn't hack it. Right. It's you think, oh, it's community college, I'll be fine. It's college. Right. It's higher learning. It's an institute of education. Correct. And it's good. Naturally, it's going to weed out people that really shouldn't be there, at least at that time in their lives. Some of them may have gone back later, but you cannot go there thinking that, oh, this is just Suffolk Community. The education is world class. The professors are amazing. I had some amazing professors, amazing classes, so many foundational skills that I still use to this day were learned at Suffolk Community College. I mean, I took Intro to Human Communication. All that was forcing us out of our comfort zone and talking publicly. Right. Everyone says public speaking is their biggest fear, even more than death. Indeed. I had to take that class. Right. I would not be able to sit in front of you, a man as esteemed as you, and talk and look you in your eye without that course. Without that course teaching me that to have confidence, to project, to do this, to do that. Some of that was just so instrumental in just who I am today. So those 2 years were just the most phenomenal time I've had in an educational setting.
Great higher learning, and I
Yes.
applaud, our community colleges and all of the options that we have for education throughout our society, trade schools and others. We cannot diminish the value that they bring
Not at all.
to all of our lives. So you graduate from there with your associates, and then you decide, is it shortly thereafter that you go to Stony Brook to finish your bachelor's?
Right. So when I got into Suffolk, they put me on something called joint admissions. So you do your first 2 years at Suffolk, obviously at a much less financial burden, and then you matriculate naturally into Stony Brook University and you take all your credits. So the amazing thing for me was that when I got to Stony Brook in summer of 2003, I was legitimately a junior. It
yep.
wasn't like I was losing credits.
Right.
Every credit I had and graduated from Suffolk with transferred right over to Stony
Right.
Brook. So that was a great way sort of to, in some ways, save 2 years of a 4-year school and do your first 2 years at Suffolk. So I'll always be thankful for that because financially, my undergraduate career didn't break the bank the way the bank is being broken for some.
No
the way
doubt.
your daughters will probably break your bank.
Don't get me started. Mia's talking about Cornell. Oh, Lord.
God bless her.
Jesus. Yes.
God bless her. I'm sure she will have the grades to get more scholarships than I had, but the cost of education is something that
It's prohibitive.
we need to start talking more about. I know we've talked about loan forgiveness and this, that, and the third, but I used to do college, and we'll get to that, I guess, in a second. I used to do college tours, and we would take young people to different schools, different campuses, and as soon as they said the tuition, some of those kids were like, there's no way I can go here. Oh, there's scholarships, there's financial aid. I can't go here.
Right.
I'm coming from a single parent background. My mom doesn't make a whole lot of money. My father doesn't make a lot of money. How am I going to afford X amount of dollars? So it is prohibitive for a lot of people.
So why political science? Why poli-sci?
I took an interest in it. I got to tell you. So to step back, in 8th grade, we went to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And it was 1997. And it was right after the second inauguration of Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton. And I wasn't there for inauguration, but just being in that city, being in that town, it's like, this is really cool. And I've since been to D.C. a million times. I love D.C. It's one of my favorite places to go. But I really just fell, and you could even go back further, and this might sound a little crazy, but Ronald Reagan. Like seeing Ronald Reagan speak as a child, I was like, oh. And I didn't necessarily know about policy and Republicans, Democrats, and all these different conservative, liberal. None of that mattered. It was just seeing people who were in positions of leadership, and I was like, oh, these people have influence. They have power. They have the sort of ability to impact our lives one way or another. So just seeing that, and I was like, once I got to Stony Brook, I looked more into majors that were available. And I'm not a STEM guy. I have to be honest with you. I know Stony Brook is a huge STEM school. Mathematically, it's just not my thing.
Understood.
Engineering, not my thing. That's my wife's thing. She's the scientist of the family. So I thought, I can do science, but it's got to be political science. It's got to be studying how policies are made, how policies are crafted, studying how policies impact communities, how certain decisions are made, how the laws get made. Political science, but for me, that was where it was at. And it was a really interesting time to get into poli-sci because 2003, you've got the George Bush presidency happening. You've got all these different things happening. I just thought it was a natural fit for me going into that school. And then shout out to Stony Brook's political science department. It's amazing. Right. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic.
I was just on that campus today. So 2005, you graduate. What are you looking to do? Where are you applying? What are your dreams? Or what's your plan at that point?
My plan at that point, I want to do something in the community. I want to do some type of community work. I want to work in nonprofit. I had some internships that were in the corporate world, and I decided very early, I can't be the corporate dude. It's just not my thing. I remember, I'm not going to name the name, but I had an internship at a company not too far from here, and I couldn't even tell you what their actual business was. All I know was that all I did was make copies.
Right.
And they would just say, oh, we got an intern. Charles, go make the copies, or go get some coffee. And I'm just like, I should be doing something. Like, what are y'all actually get up out of your bed and come here for 8-9 hours a day and just do this? And it's not impacting anybody. It's not affecting the world one way or another. Like, if this company folded, the world would go on.
Right.
And that, for me, was like, I can't have that. I cannot get out of bed every day and feel good about that. So corporate world was not for me. So it was like, kind of, how do I find a job that can sort of marry my love of wanting to be in the community and be with people and being able to get a paycheck? Because ultimately we got to have some type of income to live and survive. I was young at the time, still living at home, so I didn't need the six-figure job or whatever, but I just wanted something that was going to feed my soul. That was really what it was about for me at that time. I was 22, 23 years old.
Right.
I had jobs, but nothing like the big grown-up job. So I was just looking for something to, just really immerse myself in and really learn more about how to be a professional, because I knew what I was lacking, and I was lacking in professional skills, just that ability to walk into a room with an executive presence, no matter what your title is, and sort of command respect. I really wanted that in the community.
So you're working, you're earning some money for a living, and then you decide you want to go back to school.
Yes.
Why, and why public policy?
When I was at Stony Brook, my plan when I was doing poli-sci was to get the master's right after that. But as you know, and as everyone else knows, sometimes life happens. You take a job, you love it, and I loved the job working there. I was working at a place called Snap Long Island, doing after-school programs and things like that. And you just sort of get comfortable, and you're like, I'm not going back to school now. I'll put it off till next year. 1 year becomes 2 years, and then 2 years becomes 5 years, and then I'm like, okay, now it's time for me to go get a master's degree. I just think it would be a good credential for me to have. I thought the public policy program at Stony Brook was phenomenal. It was a program that could be done in about a year and a half. It wasn't a huge commitment in terms of monetary because, again, it was Stony Brook State School. I had saved up enough money to sort of put myself through graduate school without having to take out financial aid and all that good stuff. So I just thought public policy would be sort of the natural marriage of, well, you've learned all about political science and how the system works. And now let's kind of dig deeper into how policies get made and how policies impact the communities that you're working in. Because what I started to notice working in the nonprofit world, and I'm sure you know this, that's all politics. It's all who you know. We would go up to Albany and lobby for programs, lobby for grant funding. It's all about who you know and sort of who you're able to build connections with. And it didn't matter whether they had a D next to their name or an R next to their name. Right. It was about who believes in what we're doing and who will support us. Right. Nonpartisan. It wasn't about choosing a side. It was about finding people that you can build consensus with and build coalitions with. So public policy to me just seemed like a natural fit.
Yeah, no, and it is a natural fit for you, in the ways that I know you. I think it was perfect. It was custom-made suit made for you. So you graduate, and then that opens a door with EOC.
Right.
So how did that happen?
So it was basically after getting a master's degree, my immediate supervisor at the time thought, well, you have a master's degree now, you have some level of experience, let's try to get you in a position that kind of ties some of these things together. So they promoted me around that time to, I'm losing the title, I think it was Senior Coordinator for Community Services. I think that was is that it? I'm surprised. It was over 10 years ago, so I'm surprised I remember that. But yeah, so I had been working at EOC, and they kind of saw something in me, some talent in me, and thought, let's put him in a position where he's able to sort of oversee some things. So it was a perfect position for me because I got to keep doing frontline work, keep being in schools, but also oversee some things, join some coalitions. I got put on the Welfare to Work Commission in Suffolk County. It was an amazing experience, and I will always be thankful that someone, regardless of having a master's or not, somebody saw something in me to say, let's put him in a position to be able to do more because we think he has the skill set for it.
Right. So EOC, as many of us know, Economic Opportunity Council of Suffolk County, does some amazing work.
Yes.
Has amazing individuals kind of leading the way and contributing and partnering with so many different agencies and so many different organizations. You were there, it looks like 7 years or so. What would you say was your greatest accomplishment, from a personal or team perspective?
I always look at it from the team perspective because there's nothing at EOC that we could do without the team. Right. Without a bunch of talented people coming together to put on college trips, to make after-school programs, to do this, to do that. So for me, the highlight of my time there was and really what I look back and reflect on is all the great work we did with young people. In the after-school setting, I'm so proud of those college tours, because so many of those kids did go on to go to college. Maybe they didn't go to Howard and Harvard University like we took them to because of the cost, but they went on to go into higher education. And to me, all these years later, whenever I hear from one of those kids and they say, Mr. Fox, that college tour, that was really an amazing experience for me. I had never left Suffolk County before that. Or
That's
profound.
That is profound.
Yeah,
to think that.
Yeah.
Your blinders were only Suffolk County, right?
Right. And to expose young people to something more than just what they see. And that's not to knock any communities that we work in. It's just there's more out there for you.
Absolutely.
And there's no barrier to your success other than your own limitations that you put on yourself. That's really what it's about. So overall, I think that my time at EOC was really about what we were able to do as a team. I worked in youth and adolescent services. So, and I know that the YES program collaborates with them fairly often. We just were, and they continue to do amazing work in the schools. And I think that's something that I'm happy to have been part of that legacy. Right. That just being able to say, I contributed to that.
So 6 years ago in October, you migrate to the Legal Aid Society. Right. Tell our viewers how that happened. How did that opportunity come about? How excited were you to take on that role? Tell us a little bit about the beginnings of your Legal Aid Society career.
Sure. That was something that if you had told me then, or let's say 7 years ago, that I would be working at Legal Aid Society, I would have said no way, because I'm not going to have a Juris Doctorate.
Right.
So I can't work at Legal Aid Society, because at that time, my limited understanding of what the organization was you have to be an attorney. I didn't realize there are support staff, there's paralegals, there's administrators, there's social workers. There's all these amazing people that do the work that is not necessarily in the courtroom. But I will say that, it was a fortuitous opportunity. One of my former colleagues from EOC, Ms. Deborah Sterling Walters, saw an opportunity for me to marry all the things that I had been doing with this new sort of avenue into criminal justice and into sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion, development. And she just presented an opportunity and said, hey, I'd like you to meet with our attorney in charge. I think, she's amazing. She gets it. I think that she would, be able to sort of look at your skill set and find a place for you here. If you're willing to do it, if you want to do it, because it's always daunting to think about leaving an organization that you love, that you've been with for a long time. So it was kind of, I agonized over it. Like, do I leave? Do I sort of start a new path? But as you know, as you recently kind of shifted gears in your career, sometimes you just have to take the leap, and you have to think about, maybe it's time for me to do something different.
Right.
It's nothing, where, you always have to be able to feel good about the decisions that you're making. And for me, it was just, I think this is the right decision for my career, for my family. I was a young father at the time. My son was about a year old. And I'm just thinking, okay, if I'm going to change course in my career, now would be the time. So
let's talk about balance real quick, because we always talk about life balance for women, but we don't necessarily focus on the life balance for men.
Right.
Tell our viewers about your relationship and your relationship with your wife, with your son, and how you've balanced that with your profession.
Right. So I've since had a daughter too. So I have two now, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. All we ever talk about.
And their names?
Jasmine and Jackson.
Okay.
Yes.
Jasmine and Jackson.
And Jackson.
Hi, Jasmine and Jackson.
Yeah. So we're always talking about, how do we pour into these kids? How do we give them every single opportunity that they can possibly have to be successful? How do we give them the love that we had when we were young people? She comes from an amazing family. I think my family's pretty amazing. How do we give these kids that very same thing? Because we don't want to cheat them out of opportunities. So finding that balance is very important. I think work is very important, obviously. I think the work that we do is important, but you've got to be able to balance that with your home life and being a parent. Whether you're a parent or not, just finding things that make you happy.
Right.
Self-care. I know I'm always telling Deborah, self-care. You have to do something that makes you happy. It's very important. You cannot lose sight of the fact that if you're not good, you can't do the work to help others. You have to center and secure yourself first. So I love spending time with my kids. It's just watching them grow is amazing. It's bittersweet to watch them go on to, like, every day it seems like they're changing. You know how it is. So I'll come home and I'll just look at my daughter and I'll say, well, wow, she's almost 2.5 now.
Right.
And it feels like yesterday she was just being born. My son is going to be 7. He's going to be in 2nd grade soon. It just goes so fast. So I savor every single moment I get with them. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to balance your work responsibilities with being a parent, because that is important. Work is work. It's important. It'll be there. But sometimes you have to sort of unplug and say, you know what, I have to spend time with the people who really matter sometimes.
So you've become such a great role model to me and so many, and I'm sure that your children will realize the great role model that you are to them through your example, through your leadership, and through your participation in our world, making a difference. So talk to us about Legal Aid Society and what you're able to accomplish, what you do with Deborah and all of the amazing individuals that are part of the Legal Aid Society.
Right. So Deborah's my partner in a lot of different things. We have work that's obviously in some ways different, but there's a lot of crossover. So we do a lot of things together when it comes to community work. The Legal Aid Society, as you know, as an attorney, it exists because the constitutional right to an attorney is enshrined in our Constitution. You know, you cannot be in court and not have representation. If you can't,
at least for now.
At least for now, yes.
Before any crazy executive order.
Before anything happens. But if you cannot afford an attorney, one is provided to you, and more often than not, it's a legal aid attorney. And our organization is an organization, that's why we call this society. We're all about being holistic and seeing a whole person and figuring out how we can get this person to the best possible outcome. Whether it is a treatment program, whether it is a reduced sentence or whatever it is, how can we make sure that justice is ensured? And before I came to Legal Aid, I didn't know how somebody who's not an attorney can play into that mission. And then I started thinking about, as I was approaching starting the job, I started thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those things go hand in hand with the system of justice that we're supposed to have. Those things are integral parts of our criminal legal system. We don't always see it play out in real time, so it's very important that we think about, are we being just? Are we being equitable in our decisions? Are we doing sentencing in a way that's fair? Or is sentencing going to be, is there going to be a disparity in sentencing based on race or based on background and class? We know that people that have access to financial means usually have better outcomes in court. It shouldn't be that way. It should be a system that's based on what's fair and what's right. And that's what we're really trying to do. And I know that I can speak for Deborah when I say all the community work is all about making sure that the stakeholders have a say in what we're doing in terms of, you know, people that have had interaction with the criminal legal system. What is your input? You know, we interview attorneys all the time. We ask them, well, how would you feel if you had a client that knows the system inside and out? Would you be willing to let them help in their own defense? Would you be willing to let them would you be willing to listen to them? Really, at a base level, it's just listening to the lived experiences of the people we work with. That's the most important thing, because we all have blind spots. We all have things that we just haven't experienced personally or we just aren't aware of. Somebody out there is, but are you willing to open your mind and your heart and listen to that person? And listen to the downtrodden as well. Listen to the people that aren't listened to, the marginalized folks in society. Listen to what they have to say. Because people who are politicians, they're in big positions, they're in leadership. We hear them talk all the time. I want to hear from people that have lived these lives that many of us have been privileged and blessed not to have to go through. What's on their mind? How can they inform the work that we do?
Let me tell you, you're playing my instrument right now, man, because you are preaching at such a high level and such an effective level, such an eloquent level. Your message needs to be heard. It needs to be, kind of distributed out in the world. And this showcasing of you and your journey is so important today more than ever. So I love the fact that, and I myself consider myself pretty knowledgeable, somewhat educated and informed, right?
You being humble there.
No. But what I'm trying to say is that I didn't realize how holistic the Legal Aid Society is, right? So talk to our viewers today about some holistic kind of things that Legal Aid Society is accountable and responsible for that perhaps they don't imagine, like me.
Right. So I think most people, when they think about legal aid or public defense, they'll think, okay, it's an attorney who represents somebody who's been charged with a crime. And that is what takes place. But when we talk about the whole person, what traumas has that person experienced? What have they gone through in their lives that has led them to being in front of a judge? We talked about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. What's going on with that?
Right.
What has happened to this person? What has really kind of informed their decision making? What deficiencies do they have? We have some amazing social workers. Our social workers are always thinking about ways to get people.
I didn't know that.
Most people don't know that.
Legal Aid had social workers.
Most people don't.
That's amazing. And I consider myself somewhat informed, right?
Right.
So that's shame on me for not knowing that and being a champion for that.
No shame on you at all. It's just a question of making sure that we're doing better with getting the mission of our organization out and how we do our work. Our social workers will do all they can to try to connect people to resources. Because what often happens is our clients are food insecure.
Right.
They're dealing with housing instability. They're dealing sometimes with a mental illness or a mental health crisis. Sometimes there's a substance abuse issue. There's all these different peripheral things that are happening, and we're sitting there putting them in front of a judge and thinking that throwing them in jail is going to be the best course of action for them. We're looking at, what's the best way to get this person whole again? Incarceration might not be the best avenue for that. Maybe there's a treatment program that's out there. Maybe there's some program out there that can help them. Maybe there's, maybe there's something that can sort of spark their interest in terms of a career path that they hadn't considered before. There's so many ways to think about it, and you're not going to be able to over-incarcerate your way out of a problem.
Right.
All the problems that affect our society and our communities, we've tried mass incarceration. We've tried sort of throwing people in jail and throwing away the key. That's not necessarily always the best way. And I think the misnomer that some people have about public defenders, or really defense attorneys in general, is that no one is looking to absolve people from bad deeds or things that they've done that are not okay. It's about accountability, but it's also about sort of, how do you help a person be a better version of themselves, and throwing them in a situation that they're not going to be rehabilitated, they're not going to improve their life, their lot in life. They're just going to be back in front of a judge later on.
Right.
And again, it goes back to, and I have to keep saying it, there but for the grace of God go I.
Right.
Any one of our clients could be any one of us.
Indeed.
So when people act like, the people that defense attorneys represent are these horrible, heinous people, I always remind them, that could easily be you. And do you want to live in a society where the government can throw you in jail without cause, just for nothing, with no defense?
Right. Absolutely not when it affects you personally.
Right.
So talk to our audience as we kind of close our conversation today about opportunities to partner, collaborate with Legal Aid Society, or perhaps maybe even volunteer or employment opportunities.
Right. So we are always looking for eager young attorneys to come into our district court bureau and really represent people holistically. There's always internship opportunities. We have different bureaus. We have Children's Law Bureau. We have Family Court. We have pre-indictment felonies. We have our County Court Bureau. We have Immigration, East End. Lots of different, I don't want to leave anybody out, but we have lots of opportunities for internships. I think one thing that people need to understand, again, is that one of the things that's cool about legal aid is that you may not even be in law school. You may be just thinking about it. Maybe you can come shadow an attorney and just watch how they work and watch what they do. The courts are a public place. I don't think people really realize that you can walk into a courthouse and observe arraignments or whatever's going on. People need to remember that. You can always court watch. You can always see what's happening. I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that different nonprofits do different things. That's why collaboration is so important. I don't think it's the proper way to go when we have nonprofit organizations trying to do everything.
Right.
It's not just about funding and grants and all that stuff. It's about, if you know this nonprofit does this well, you want to get involved, collaborate with them.
Correct.
See how you can step in and help them. Don't overstep them and try to say, oh, we're going to try and take away this avenue and get in their wheelhouse. No, that's not how you build consensus and coalitions. Working with people is how you do that. It's important for all of our nonprofits to remember that you exist and you're funded for a reason. If there's something you want to do, an avenue you want to go down, find out who does that and collaborate with them. Because in the end, it's going to be good for the community. It's going to be good for people. And we're in the business of people.
So as far as how do my viewers, anybody watching this podcast, find out more information about the Legal Aid Society website, social media presence, etc.?
Right. You can definitely go to the website. It's sclas.org. You can find out more about our programs, our bureaus. You can always look at that site and kind of find out what the work of the Legal Aid Society is. Anybody that's interested can contact me directly, cfox@sclas.org. They can definitely reach out to me if you have any questions. If you're an attorney who is, looking to start your career and you're really interested in public defense, shoot me an email. Go on to our website. You can apply directly. We have a fantastic human resources person who, will usually forward me the resumes and say, Deborah, Charles, Ayanna, Matt, our hiring committee, our interview committee, we'd like you to speak to this person. And that's another thing we do is inclusive interviewing. So we don't just have one person interviewing somebody. We have people with different perspectives interviewing candidates to kind of really get a sense of how this person might fit into the society. I would say, just look into a career in the criminal legal system is very important. There's lots of different careers, even outside of Legal Aid Society, careers in the courts. Because that's another thing I do on the Equal Justice Committee is think about how we can get young people interested in, you want to be a prosecutor, you want to be a defense attorney, you want to be a court officer, you want to be a judge someday, you want to be a stenographer. There's lots of different careers that happen in the courts that are not necessarily, you don't necessarily need a Juris Doctorate to have.
Right. Awesome. Well, I'd like you to understand how much you inspire me and how you uplift me in just our interactions, man. Iron sharpens iron, and I'm truly grateful and appreciative of you being here. But if you were to have a closing message for my viewers, for young people, for old people like me out there listening to you and talking about your journey, what would be the inspirational kind of last message that you would like to share on our podcast today?
Thank you, Mark. First, it's very, very much mutual. And I trust me, this is not really me to get up here and talk about myself for however amount of time we've been talking. So it's definitely, I would only really do this for somebody that I value and trust and look up to. Right. So I really appreciate you for even having me on this. I mean, the Champions podcast, I'm a champion now. Like that's yes, you are. That's big time.
Stop it. Accept it. Celebrate it.
I'm trying to give myself grace and be more accepting of any type of praise. But what I would say, and again, this is something I always say, the only real currency we have out here in this world is kindness. And I know it sounds cliche, and it's like, oh, Charles is about to get on his corny soapbox. But you have to be kind to people. You have to think about what people are going through, what they've been through. One of my old colleagues used to always say, you don't know what people had for breakfast. So keep that in mind. Whether it's a client that walks into our doors, whether it's somebody who gave you an attitude at Starbucks or whatever, try to give people grace because it will go a long way. And your reputation, as you know, your reputation is going to be everything. It's what precedes you when you walk into a room. People know about you already. So make sure you protect that and develop a good reputation for yourself so that when opportunities come up, people will think of you. Think about what people say about you in rooms that you're not in. Right. Because there's going to be many situations where opportunities will present themselves to you based on something you did or said years prior. So just treat people with kindness and always do the right thing.
Okay. Thank you. I am blessed. We are blessed. We accept you as part of our chosen family. You are part of the champion circle because you are a true champion, and you've proven that throughout your lifetime. So we thank Mr. Charles Fox for being here today. Once again, we thank Liga de Justicia Abogados and Liga de Justicia Foundation. We thank our village that uplifts and supports us each and every day. My past guests, my future guests, if you have suggestions for amazing people who have great stories to tell, please let us know. Stay tuned and always, always do what you can to make a difference. Thank you for being with the Champion Circle today, and stay blessed.